Here we're going to tie a Kwan. This is a great fly for bonefish, redfish, basically any flat species. This fly imitates a shrimp. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a set of eyes. Now, depending on where you're going to be fishing this and how deep you're going to be fishing depends on the type of eyes that you're going to use. I'm adding a pair of medium Beadchain eyes here, but I'll use this in a lead eye form as well if I'm fishing deeper water. So all I'm doing is just figure eighting around these eyes, making sure they're nice and tight. Then I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap back down the back here, and I'm going to stop just short of the bend. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of whiting grizzly, either natural brown or coachman brown hackle. This is from the bugger packs. I'm going to tie this in right along the side of the shank. And I do this just to keep the body nice and even and uniform. I don't want to make it too bumpy in the back. It'll make it tougher as we add our body later. And I take my thread back, and I'm going to take that brown hackle and I'm going to spin just a little collar at the back here, not too much, and I can capture that feather, trim out the extra. Now what I'm going to do is wrap back up on these fibers just a little bit, try to get them to lay back. You can wet your fingers and pull them back if that helps a little bit. We don't want these to stand up too much. We want this to be kind of a collar. So what I'm going to do is just wrap back just a little bit on these. It'll help force them back a little bit. Now this is basically the legs of the shrimp, and it also acts as a prop for our tail, which we're going to tie in next. And for that we're going to use some tan. You can use sand or brown. The Kwan can also be tied in chartreuse, so it depends on what color you want to tie. I'm going to tie it here in a tan color, and we're going to use some pseudo hair. You can use craft fur though too. I prefer the pseudo hair. It's much more supple, more dense, but craft fur is usually what it's traditionally tied with, and that works just fine as well. And we want this tail to be fairly long. We want it to be 3 times or so the length of the hook shank. And I just kind of roughly measure it out and I cut it to the length that I want. I'm just going to tie that in right here at the back, a couple of turns. Trim out any trapped fibers here. You can see how that tail is standing straight up now because of that little prop that I made with that hackle. It's exactly what we want. Now the next thing to do is to tie in the body segments. For that we're going to use some EP fibers. We're going to use tan and brown. And I just tie them in 3-inch chunks. I just take that EP fiber and I'm just going to figure eight around the EP. Put it right where I want it. And then I can add the other color, which will be my brown. I just alternate these as I tie them in. And depending on how much room you left, you can do, you know, 3, 4, or 5 segments. This one, it looks like I'll probably get about 4 or 5 in, but if you leave it a little bit shorter, a lot of times you can only get 3, and that's perfectly fine. 3 is more than enough. Yeah, looks like I have room for one more. Once you get the last one in there, you can take your thread and jump it up to the eye of the hook. You're ready to trim the body of the Kwan. And to trim the body, what I do is I take all the fibers and I draw them up or down, either way. I'm going to trim them at an angle, and I usually trim with the angle being smaller at the front, and it'll get bigger as we go back. It'll taper back. And I just take my scissors and I get the very back end of the scissor in there, and I just trim all that EP fiber. And then you can form the body by just pulling down the fibers again. And what you've done is made just basically the body of the Kwan. Looks like kind of like a toad, same type of look. Kwan has the same body shape as that toad. Maybe it's a little smaller just because it's a shrimp. And most Kwans will have a Weedgaurd, so we can go ahead and tie in a Weedgaurd. I just use a double-pronged Weedgaurd. And how I do that is I take the natural shape of the mono here, see how it's curved, and I let those curves face backwards, and all I do is I just lash one side to my hook here, and I just fold the other side over and lash it down. This is the harder one. I just pinch it down and just start wrapping back up over it. And then what I do is I take all that mono, pull it forward, and trim some of it out of here if you need to. Pull it all forward, and I'm going to lay basically a thread dam or a wedge right behind it. This will force that mono to stand up and keep it from moving around on you. And if you like, you can go in between all the pieces, but usually you don't need to do that. And we'll super glue it here, and that'll help keep it in place. And to trim that mono Weedgaurd, I basically trim it just behind the hook point. That way any weeds that hit it will just glance off. And we can whip finish. And it's very important to super glue this fly too, but we have one more step here, and that's to put the striping on the fly, or the barring on the fly. Give you a better look here. And for that I just use a Sharpie. You can use other markers too. I'm going to bar this one with some black, but you can bar it with brown, you can bar them with orange. Brown's actually a really good color to bar with, but black stands out much better too and lasts a little bit longer in the salt. Usually these bar marks will fade after you've been fishing it for a few minutes, so the black will help keep it a little bit darker, stand out a little bit longer. Put one more back here by the tail. Not that it really matters too much, but basically just do whatever barring you like. And that's all there is to the Kwan. And you just the last thing you want to do is, of course, super glue it. I'll show you how to do that. I use just some brush on Zap-A-Gap, if I can open the container here. There we go. I just basically put it all over the head where we put in the mono Weedgaurd, and then what I do is I just slather it all over the bottom of this fly too, where that thread is exposed. I really get it in there. Cover it all up. Try not to get any on the EP fibers itself. And then for last good measure here, I'll actually take the brush and I'll put it right down the middle of the fly where that thread is exposed. And that's all there is to the Kwan. Fairly easy fly to tie. Let me zoom out here so you can get a better look. Very effective redfish fly, bonefish fly, even permit will eat them. Basically anything that eats a shrimp. And you can buy all the materials for this fly at In the Riffle. And everything is free shipping over $10. Thanks for watching.